Hey, everybody. So, welcome to HackerRank TV. This is Zainab, your host for today, and we are back with another live stream. And today's live stream is with Kesha Williams. Hey, Kesha, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hi, everyone.
Hey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm super excited to be here.
Oh, I am too, trust me. So, our guest for today is Kesha Williams, and Kesha is an inspiration to many in the world of tech. She's been in this space way before it was as inclusive as it is today. Kesha has 25 years of experience in software development, which means that she's been creating software even before my parents created me. So, after starting her career in software development with Java, she steered herself towards the cloud computing space and is currently working as a senior principal at AWS Cloud at Salem. And because of her high technical and personal acumen, she has been recognized by Amazon as AWS Machine Learning Hero and Alexa Champion, Speaker and Mentor of the Year 2021 by Women Tech Network, and she also serves as a board member of Women in Voice. Oh my God, that's like a very long list of accomplishments. And not just that, it does not end there. Okay, not just that. Forbes, AWS, and Oracle have also lauded her work for the technical community at large. So she holds a special fondness for HackerRank, if I might say, and we for her, of course. She is a part of HackerRank's Skill Advisory Council and has been featured on HackerRank Radio, and now she's a HackerRank All Star. So today she's here to talk to us about the cloud and also teach us how to start building for it. Welcome to the live stream, Kesha, and to our family of All Stars.
Thank you. I am super excited to be here, and thank you for that amazing introduction.
Thanks, no problem. Thank you. Let us begin with the questions. I'm going to get right to it. So, my first question is Kesha, could you please take us through your career journey to become a professional Java developer, or according to your LinkedIn username, a Java rockstar, and then going on to become a cloud and AWS expert?
I sure will. And I don't know why I picked that as my LinkedIn username. I did that years ago, and now it's totally impossible to change it. But yes, I'll be happy to take you through my journey. So I actually started coding in high school. And at the time, I didn't even realize that what I was doing was called coding. I just called it playing on the computer. So I had this room. We had this room in our house that doubled as my dad's office and my playroom. And I always joke and tell people like I had a Barbie doll in one hand, and in the other hand, I had a computer manual and I was learning how to code BASIC. So that programming language. And I just think that exposure early on just really set me up for this lifelong love of technology and innovation. And so when it was time for me to go away to college, it was an easy choice for me to pick computer science. Majored in computer science. I ended up with a mathematics minor as well. And then when I graduated from college, I actually started with Microsoft active server pages. So building websites and web applications using Microsoft ASP, some older technologies like VB Script and ActiveX controls. And that was really the precursor to .NET. So that's how I started my career. And then I remember, and this will really date me, when this new programming language called Java came out. And I researched Java and I became so excited because I just thought like this language is going to take over the world. This is where I need to take my career. And so I actually left the organization where I was working and I started working for Delta Airlines because they gave me an opportunity to learn Java on the job. And I could say that that was really the best career decision that I've ever made because Java literally took off. It's still one of the more popular programming languages, and it really sustained most of my career. And then I would say about 7 or 8 years ago, I was introduced to the cloud and Amazon Web Services. And I felt about AWS and the cloud how I felt about Java way back then. I was like, oh my goodness, the cloud is amazing. It's going to revolutionize the way we build systems, the way we produce systems, this is where I need to take my career. And then 3 years ago, I felt the same way about machine learning, and I started learning about machine learning on the cloud. And so there again, I can say that just making that transition to the cloud it's been a lot of fun, but it's opened the door for me. It's given me so many opportunities to just continue to learn new things, meet new people, go new places. So I always think, okay, you went from Java to the cloud to machine learning. Like, what's next for you? So right now, I don't know how to answer that question. So I'll be sticking with the cloud.
That's great, Keisha. So this is one of like the most important months for me. Like I feel like this is one of the best months in like all the 12 months of the calendar because it's Women's History Month,
Right.
and and you've been changing the game for women in the field of tech for a long time now. Last year, you won a Women Tech Network Global Tech Leadership Award too. What words of advice do you have for other women and people of color? Importantly.
Yes, that's a great question. So I can definitely say that early on in my tech journey, I learned that in order to be successful, I really needed to always push myself outside of my comfort zone. And then I needed to adopt this mindset of continuous learning. Being in the tech field, tech changes rapidly, and you really have to work hard to keep your skills up to date and to stay relevant. So that's something that I learned early on in my career. Like I remember when I took that chance on the Java programming language and really left behind the technology that I knew and that I was comfortable with. And I remember when I was first learning about the cloud and AWS, a lot of people around me were very hesitant. I mean, they had this mindset like, we're going to put our code on someone else's server. Like, no, that's never going to happen. Um, but I just always had this mindset of continually learning and learning new things. And I think that growth mindset has really taken me far in my career. So my advice to women in tech, in order to succeed in the cloud or just in technology in general, you'll have to have a similar attitude. And really, to all the women in tech, I say believe in yourself and always take a chance on yourself. Even when others around you may not believe in you or they may not expect that from you, just always believe in yourself and take a chance and just never let how someone else views you or their opinion of you, don't ever let that make you doubt yourself and your abilities. So that's some advice. It's some things I've learned through the years.
That's amazing advice, Keisha. So let's jump into the discussion that all of us have been waiting for. To start things off, could you briefly explain to us what exactly is the cloud?
Yeah, the cloud is very simple. It's just access to computing resources over the internet. And typically it's on demand, it's pay as you go. So you're able to access compute services like servers, database, storage, networking, analytics. You're just able to access that over the internet. So that's the simple definition of cloud computing.
A follow-up question to that would be why should people learn to develop for the cloud? Can you shed light on a few things that makes it a game changer?
Yeah, so there are just so many advantages to the cloud for huge enterprises, for individual developers, for small companies. The biggest thing that I've seen is just it allows for rapid innovation. So instead of having to focus on maintaining servers and doing some of the more maintenance related tasks, you're able to focus on this new app idea that you have. And you're able to really work on what differentiates your business. And so for me, the biggest benefit of the cloud is innovation, and just not just innovation, but rapid innovation. So you can have an idea of this cool app that you want to build. You can have that idea today. And in a matter of days using AWS, you can have that idea out in production, ready, like delivered globally, there for people to use and try out. And then also from an innovation perspective, I told you about my journey. So from Java to cloud to machine learning, I would have never felt confident really to approach machine learning if it hadn't been for some of the machine learning services on AWS. So it also, like I said, it helps with innovation, but it also just inspires you to experiment and explore and continue to learn. And another benefit is around agility, so speed to market. I remember when I first started building on the cloud, it was really just me as an individual developer. Late at night, once I put my kids to bed, I would experiment and have side projects and build things. And what I realized, because of AWS, I didn't need a team of like developers to bring my app idea alive, because AWS just really provided a great foundation for me to build by myself what I needed to build. So just the agility, also the speed to market. Like you can literally, at the click of a button, stand up GPU servers if you need that for your workload. And there are services like AWS Amplify that generate full stack web applications for you on AWS. And then there's also cost savings. So like I mentioned, as a single developer, I was able to build and deploy these huge applications at a very low cost. So with AWS, you have a lot of cost savings. It's you no longer have a lot of upfront costs. I didn't have to sign long-term contracts. I only paid for the resources and services that I use. And with AWS, there's a free tier, like a 12-month free tier. If you're just learning and you want to start and you don't have a lot of money to invest, the free tier allows you to access most of the services for free. And then after the free tier, a lot of services have an always free tier. So they're just like so many benefits that I could just continue to talk on and on and on about just how amazing the cloud is.
Okay, that's good. That's really
Yeah,
great.
I could just keep talking on and on about that.
Yeah. So my next question is how to get started with cloud and cloud native patterns and architecture.
Yeah, so I do have about a 15 to 20-minute presentation that I'd like to go through.
We'd love to see that.
Yeah, so I'll just have to share my slides. Oh, well, can you share the slides for me? I don't see. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so this portion will take about, like I said, 15 or 20 minutes to talk about getting started with cloud native patterns and architecture. So first, what I'd like to do, I'd like to walk you through just this architecture evolution. Like Zainab mentioned, I've been in tech for 26 years now, and I've just seen the architecture for backend architectures just evolve. So when I first started, the monolithic architecture was huge. So this is where you take the UI, the business logic, and the data access layer, and you bundle it and you deploy it in one artifact, one huge artifact. And so there were several downsides to this approach. So for example, monolithic applications, they're very tightly coupled. So in this image, if the UI goes down or if there's an issue with the business logic, it impacts all the other layers and it could bring the entire application down. And then over time, what we notice, as you continue to add new features into a monolithic application, the complexity grows. And it just makes it very hard to implement smaller changes without impacting other areas of the application. So there was monolithic, and then came on the market SOA, or service-oriented architecture. And that is where you take that monolith and you sort of break it up into different components. And in this case, we used web services that communicated over SOAP using XML. Now, this helped some, but what we saw was that it was just very rigid. It was hard to make changes. If you're familiar with the WSDL or the contract for a particular web service, whenever that contract changes, everyone that's calling that service has to recompile their code. And so that was a huge drain on developers. The next evolution was this API-led, API-driven architecture. And that's where you have APIs and you're communicating using REST and JSON. And that was much easier to implement. It's very flexible. The APIs were more data-driven instead of function-driven. And then what brings us to current day, microservices. And microservices really go hand in hand with cloud native development. And that's just where you have many smaller, loosely coupled services that function together to make your application. And so that really, like I said, it brings us to where we are today with cloud native. So what is cloud native? Cloud native is more than just running your applications in the cloud. So let's say you have a monolith application running in your data center, and now you want to deploy it to the cloud. Well, just lifting that application and shifting it to the cloud doesn't make it cloud native. So when we think about building cloud native applications, it's more around changing the way that you work, making use of Agile, making use of DevOps. You're also using different architecture patterns. So you're no longer using like the monolithic architecture. And I'll talk through some of the cloud native architecture patterns in this presentation. And then lastly, if you're cloud native, you're really taking advantage of everything that the cloud offers. So scalability, high availability, and more. So to build out cloud native applications, like I mentioned, you just have to rethink your approach. You're going to use microservices, and I've described what that is. You'll also use something called containers, if you've heard of Docker containers. And a container is just basically a new way to deploy your application where that container contains everything that application needs to run, like the code, the libraries, configuration files, etc. With cloud native, you'll also take use of DevOps. And typically you'll combine that with automation and building CI/CD pipelines. So all of that it's really all wrapped together when we think about cloud native. So now let's talk about some of the patterns. So the
Before you
very
get started with the patterns, I'd like to request the audience to, drop in all the questions they have regarding the presentation or any other related questions in the comment section. We'll be taking up them like in between our conversation. Please
Sounds
continue.
good. Yes, drop all your questions there for us. So the very first cloud native pattern that we're going to talk about is serverless. And like cloud and serverless go hand in hand. So I know you've all heard this term before. So what is serverless? This is essentially where you're able to write and deploy your code without having to manage and maintain the underlying infrastructure. So Amazon Web Services will handle that for you. So it really allows you to focus on, like what I mentioned before, new features that really differentiate your business from the competitor. So in The rest of my examples, I'm going to use AWS or Amazon Web Services as the use case. So what are some of the benefits of serverless? Like I mentioned, less maintenance. You don't have physical servers to maintain. Scalability, the infrastructure for serverless applications actually automatically scales based on demand. So that's one less thing you have to be concerned about. Easy deployment. So developers can release code immediately. There's a service called AWS Lambda that I'll talk more about. Just think of it like a function or a chunk of code that runs in the cloud and it's meant to do one specific purpose. Whenever you're using AWS Lambdas, your code can be released immediately if you want to do that. And then, like I mentioned before, lower costs. AWS has this always free tier with AWS Lambda where you get 1 million free calls per month. So definitely a lot of cost savings, time savings with serverless. So now let's look at the architecture of this serverless web application. So when you think about a web application, typically you'll have a three-tier architecture. And in this example, we're using an API-led approach. So you'll have your front end, you'll have your back end, and you'll have your database. So when you're looking at this diagram, 2, 3, and 4 make up your front end. So for number 1, we have a request coming in. It goes to CloudFront, which is a content delivery network. And basically, it globally deploys your website around the world. And so for this type of application on the front end, think of just static assets like React or Angular, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And from CloudFront, number 3, there's a service called AWS Web Application Firewall, or WAF. And that's just an extra layer of security that you put on your application to prevent common attacks like cross-site scripting and SQL injection. And then for number 4, Amazon Simple Storage Service, also called S3, just the name tells it all. It's a storage service. It's the origin where we put our static assets. So that React web application is actually stored in what we call an S3 bucket, and then it's served up globally through CloudFront, which is that number 2. So that's the front end. Then there's the back end piece of the application. So 5, 6, and 7, well, 5 and 6 really represent the back end. And so before I talk about 5, let me talk about number 6. So number 6, I mentioned to you AWS Lambda. It's serverless. Think of it like a chunk of code that runs in the cloud. This is where you would put all of your back-end logic for your web application. And you can author it in Java. That would be my choice. You could use Node.js, Python, and really any popular language that's supported by AWS Lambda. And so with that business logic, now let's go back to number 5. You can actually put an API endpoint on top of your function using API Gateway. So now your front end can actually make API calls to your back end. And then number 6, that's the data storage layer. In this case, there's a service called Amazon DynamoDB. It's a NoSQL database that favors scalability, availability, performance, and more. So that's a quick look at how you would architect a serverless web application on AWS.
So we've got a question here. Thank you for the amazing presentation, Kesha. And let's take a question here. Akshay asked us which cloud is best, AWS or GCP?
For me, that's a very easy question. I'm definitely biased, but trying to take a step back, I would definitely say AWS because just the breadth of services offered by AWS, there is a service like any type of application that you can dream up there's a service available on AWS to help you build that application. I can't say the same for GCP. So I would recommend AWS. It's also the certifications are well recognized in the industry. There are more customers on AWS as opposed to GCP. So just all of the reasons why I would recommend AWS. That's a great question.
Okay. And a follow-up question to that we have here. How long does it take to study for AWS Solutions Architect, and what course of study slash path should one take?
Right. So if you do not have a technical background, I would first recommend that you start with the cloud foundation, the cloud practitioner certification on AWS, because that's going to really set you up for the additional more advanced certifications. Now, if you do have a background in technology and some exposure to the cloud, then I would recommend starting with the Solutions Architect Associate, which is the certification the person asked about. And typically, I would give yourself about 3 months to really study for that certification. And as you're studying, make sure that you have this hands-on element where you're able to actually learn something and then go to the AWS console and practice it, because that will really prepare you for the certification exam. And as far as resources that I've used for my certifications, I've used A Cloud Guru. They have several awesome certification prep courses that are highly rated in the industry.
Got it. So another question about resources here. Samuel tells us he's a front-end engineer and he's always been loving cloud. However, he'd like to know if Keisha has any resource where front-end engineers like us, like him, can go to learn the AWS features like 1 to 7.
So for a front end developer, when I think about when I don't know if you can still see my slides, but in that slide, I talked about Amazon CloudFront, and I talked about the simple storage service. I talked about the security with WAF. Definitely I would say start there, because that really makes up the front end portion of your web application. So if you have static resources, you're building like a React or Angular app, that's where you would start. So start learning about those services and how they work. And then if you want to explore the back end, there's a service called AWS Amplify that really, I guess it abstracts a lot of the complexities of building a full stack web application for you. And it generates a lot of like the code and things for you. So you can also start there and just sort of see what it builds and explore the back end if you'd like to learn more about the back end. But that's totally up to you.
Great. So thank you. I think let's take up questions after my question. 1 second, please. Okay. I've asked you like I've asked you a lot of questions. So let's get to a fun segment here, and this fun segment is called as "Explain Like I Am." 5 in 30 seconds. So firstly, these are the keywords I'll be giving you, and you have to explain it like you. What if you were them?
If I were five.
Yeah. Uh,
Okay.
Yep. So my first one is cloud service provider.
Cloud service provider. All right, so you're 5 years old. So a fun analogy for that would be, let's say you want to build a house, or maybe a 5-year-old, you want to build a fort, and you need to rent some tools to do that. Maybe a nail gun, I don't know, maybe an excavator for digging. Well, you can rent those tools from companies like Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, and that's basically what a cloud provider does. So a cloud provider gives you the tools that you need to build an application. And you can rent servers, And you can rent those servers from AWS, Google, or Microsoft.
Okay. Oh, fair enough. So my second keyword is virtualization.
Virtualization. I don't think a 5-year-old can say that word, but a fun analogy for a 5-year-old. So let's say you have this orange, right? You have this whole orange, and then you peel it, and then you have slices that you can share with your friends. You can share
Oh,
those
wow.
slices with a lot of people. I would say that's what virtualization is. It's this one server that you split up into small pieces that many people can use. That's virtualization.
That one was good. That one was really good. So my third keyword is microservicing versus monolithism.
Okay. So microservices versus monolith. So for monolith, the name says it all. Think of this large, big block of stone. It's really heavy, it's hard to move around, and it's very archaic. And so then comparing that to microservices, think of microservices like little Lego blocks that are all independent, but then when you join them together, it forms a house or whatever it is you're trying to build. So that's a cool analogy. So the monolith is this huge artifact where you put everything in, and then microservices are like loosely coupled small little services that group together to form an application.
Great. So we are on the last but one now, containers.
Containers. So imagine you have this huge apartment building, and each person gets their own little room or an apartment, and that apartment is theirs. They can customize it how they want, add lights, rugs, decoration, and they put their own furniture in there. And so think about it like this: the server is the apartment building, the container is the apartment, and the application is the person that lives in that apartment. So the container, that application is really the container is customized to that application. It has everything that application needs to run. So yeah, that's how I would describe
That was
containers.
also a very cool one. And my last question for this segment is like, okay, we have to pick one from the audience now.
Okay.
So, anyone has any questions which they'd like to be explained? As if there were five, please comment below. So, sockets. Somebody comments sockets.
Sockets. Okay. That's a good one. Let's see. So let's say you have a cell phone that you need to charge, okay? And in order to charge it, you have to plug it in or connect it to something. And yeah, you have to use a socket to do that.
Okay.
That
Okay.
was a tough one.
Okay, great. Let's move on to our next question. So now that we know the how, can you give us an idea of a few projects that our audience can work on to build an awesome cloud portfolio?
Sure. So I think if you're new to the cloud, like you've never used AWS, the first project I would recommend that you start with is just your own personal website. So like years ago, I transitioned from GoDaddy, my personal website from GoDaddy to AWS. And since I did that, I've never had to pay to host my personal website. So start there. There are a lot of services like I showed you CloudFront, I showed you the S3 bucket. That's where you would put your personal website files. You would serve it up through CloudFront. There are services where you can get an SSL certificate, so AWS Certificate Manager. And there are a lot of resources on the internet about hosting a static website out of S3. So I would start there. And then I also have a blog post on A Cloud Guru that talks about 10 fun hands-on projects to learn AWS. Definitely check that blog post out. It has projects around infrastructure as code, setting up CI/CD pipelines, standing up a Jenkins server on EC2, experimenting with machine learning. So there are a lot of entry-level projects that you can get started with to advance your cloud skills. But definitely start with trying to host your personal website out of S3. I can't hear you. I don't know what happened. I'm not able to hear you. I'm not sure what happened.
Okay.
Okay, now I hear you. Now I hear you. Okay.
Sorry. Okay, I just said that thank you so much for that answer. And we've got a lot of audience questions coming in. So I'm going to wrap up with my final question.
Okay.
And this is my last question. So, after this discussion, it's clear that the cloud is very promising and we're all set to start developing for it. However, it does come with a few challenges, the primary ones being data security and cost management. So, I'm dividing this question into two parts. So, my first one being, are there any measures by which developers can maintain data security even if the cloud platform is compromised? And which has happened before, I guess.
Right. So I would definitely say data encryption at rest. There are services out of the box on AWS that help you do that, that help you generate and store encryption keys. So definitely think about encrypting data at rest. And then also you'd want to really be like on the offensive and just trying to prevent things from happening. And so, for example, whenever you sign up for AWS and you create your account, make sure you add multi-factor authentication on it. If you're standing up an EC2 instance, which is basically a server in the cloud, lock down administration to certain IP addresses. Put your resources in private networks, like turn on tracking and monitoring to see who's doing what in your account. So those are just some of the recommendations that I provide.
Okay. So my second follow-up question to this is like, what are the few best practices to properly manage costs and ensure that we don't underuse our resources?
Yeah, so AWS again is great at doing this. They give you several ways to understand your costs, manage your costs, and then ensure that you're not wasting money. And so the first thing that I would say was add a budget alert. So you can set up an alert that will either email you or send you a text message when your bill is going to be more than what you budgeted for that month. So set up a budget alert. There's also a service called Trusted Advisor that checks the utilization of EC2 instances or servers, and it can make recommendations around stopping those servers if there's low utilization. And then lastly, there's a pricing calculator where you can, even before you build your application or your solution, you can use that calculator to estimate how much it's going to cost you to run that workload on AWS. So yeah, those are some of the things I would recommend.
Thank you, Keisha. And now let's start taking questions from the audience. So I've gotten this question. What is the difference between SysOps and DevOps? Which is best for career?
So right now, I would say DevOps. DevOps is really all the rage, and it's for a good reason. So I remember early in my career before DevOps. So we would have quarterly releases. Can you imagine that today? Only pushing updates and features once a quarter. But it was because it was a very manual process. It had to be all hands on deck. But now with DevOps, it actually adds automation. It just automates the process from taking code from your local laptop and putting it in production. And so I would definitely say DevOps is the way to go, and AWS even has a DevOps professional certification. So that's one that you can like work up to if that's your goal. But yeah, definitely DevOps.
Great. I hope that answers your question, Akshay. And we have another question here. If I'm familiar with GCP, is it difficult to switch to AWS?
No, it's not difficult. A lot of the concepts, most of the concepts are the same. You just have to understand, well, it's called this on GCP. What does AWS call it? And think of it like the analogy would be switching a programming language. Like if you know Java, you understand like what is a loop, um, what is a method or a function, why would I need that? You just and now you want to learn Python, you just have to do that translation to understand how Python implements loops and functions and things like that. So no, it's not hard to switch.
Okay. And we have another question. How are automated tests integrated with the application? I'm assuming in the cloud services.
Yes. So on AWS, there are a lot of developer tools that help you implement the whole CI/CD pipeline. So with the testing piece of it, the deployment piece of it. So there's a tool suite, there's code build that actually builds your code. There's code deploy that and with code build, it actually runs the test for you before it produces the build. Then there's code deploy that will take that build and deploy it to your servers. There's a service called code pipeline. Think of it kind of like Jenkins, where it manages the whole pipeline for you. So on AWS, just check out what they call the developer tools, and you'll see that entire tool suite to help automate that process.
Okay. Moving on to our next question. Is AWS helpful for developing native and hybrid mobile applications?
Right. So as far as native mobile applications, I'm not too familiar with services that do that. Not to say that it's not there. Like I mentioned, AWS has a service for everything. So I'm pretty sure there's something for like native applications. But as far as hybrid and like mobile applications, definitely there are a ton of services out there that make it very helpful. And like I mentioned, there's also a service called AWS Amplify that does a lot of the generating of the full stack web application for you. If you're new to AWS and you're new to full stack development, I think that's a great place to start because it will help you understand just the architecture and the foundations, and then you're ready to be more advanced.
Great. I hope that answers your question, Rajshekhar. And moving swiftly, we have another question. Are there resources for real world AWS projects which can be used for practice?
Yes. So I mentioned, and maybe after this we can share the link, but on the AWS, I mean, on the A Cloud Guru blog, there's a post that I've created that illustrates like 10 hands-on projects that you can build on AWS to help you learn. So I would start there. I've known several people to actually complete all 10 of the projects. And the cool thing is, as you complete projects, you're actually building up your portfolio where you can show, like, if you're interviewing or you're looking for a job, you can show the projects that you've actually built and developed on AWS. So I would recommend checking out that blog post.
Okay, I think that's all we have for the questions, but I'm still gonna let's wait for a minute or two.
Okay.
So, any more questions, please drop in the comment section below. We're going to be taking questions for the next 1 minute or two. Oh, we have one here. Is Amazon SageMaker better than Azure MS Studio?
Again, I am definitely biased. I've never worked with the Azure ML Studio, but I do know, I remember when I first started my machine learning journey, there was a service called Amazon Machine Learning. That service was the precursor to SageMaker. And I've seen like SageMaker grow and add new features over the years. And it's just very impressive that it gives you this tool set for like the end-to-end machine learning cycle. And I think my favorite feature of SageMaker is the hosting capabilities. I don't know if Azure ML Studio has that, but with SageMaker hosting, you can actually put an API endpoint on top of your machine learning model. And that makes it very easy to integrate that model into any application that needs to get a prediction from that model. So I'm definitely biased. I would say SageMaker is my favorite AWS service.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Keisha. And any more questions, guys? So I don't have a question here, but I have this really sweet comment I'd like to show you. So one second. Yep. This was an awesome presentation. Thank you both for this wealth of knowledge.
Oh, my
People love the
pleasure.
presentation. People, I've got many comments which say that, is the presentation available for download, or, is this going to be recorded? And yep, thanks for your presentation.
My pleasure.
Okay. Yep. When should I start? Another question. When should I start learning cloud? I'm about to commence my first year of college.
That's a great question. I would say it's never too early to start learning cloud. I would imagine, well, the way it like works here in the US, typically your junior year, maybe your sophomore year, but typically your junior year, that's when you're ready for your first internship. So I would say maybe sophomore year, if you have the time, you can start looking at the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner certification. It's the foundation certification, and it introduces you to all of the services on AWS, but also the benefits of the cloud. And it helps you learn how to speak to that. So maybe your sophomore year, but if you have time, it's never too soon to get started with the cloud because you're just the sooner you know it, you're really setting yourself up for success.
So we have another question. What is the best way to connect data from HBase to SageMaker?
I'm not familiar with HBase. What is that?
Okay. Oh, I have this really sweet comment I'd like to show you. Thank you, Keisha. You made an impact in my life today.
Oh, my pleasure. So for that previous question about HBase, I'm not familiar with HBase, but I can tell you the way that I um, connect data to SageMaker. You have several options. You can, on my past projects, I've loaded the data to an S3 bucket. Remember, I talked about the storage service, Amazon Simple Storage Service. So you can upload files to your S3 bucket, and then SageMaker is able to pull your data from there. Um, Also, you can just use a URL to download your data to your SageMaker environment. Um, that's how I've done it in the past. But yeah, I'm not familiar with HBase.
Got it. Here's another question. What are the advantages while in disaster recoveries?
Yeah, so with if I understand this question, when I think about AWS, it allows for you to run highly available applications. And so, for example, what's called, so on AWS, you have what's called an availability zone, but just think about it as like data centers with servers running in a particular area of the world. And so for highly available applications, you can deploy your applications to multiple availability zones. So if one availability zone goes down, your application is still running. But then also higher than that, AWS has regions. So these are just geographic locations around the world as well. And you can also run your application in multiple regions. So if one region goes down, you still have your application up and running. And so with AWS, you do have the option for high availability.
Okay. We have this one question here. For data analyst and ML, which services are available in AWS?
Right. So there are a lot of, I guess, data analytic type services. So, for example, let's say you have a CSV file, or your data is in a CSV file, and you want to analyze that using AWS. You can drop that CSV file on S3. And then there are tools that actually let you write SQL statements to query that data. So that's one option. Also, there's SageMaker as well. SageMaker, the first phase of any machine learning project is around analyzing your data, cleaning your data, preparing that data for the machine learning process. So you can do that within SageMaker. With SageMaker, you can host Jupyter notebooks in order to like write your Python code to analyze your data. So that's another option as well. Um, AWS also supports like data lakes. There are data warehousing services used mainly for analytics. So there are a lot of options on AWS. Too many to name for data analytics.
Great. And yeah, that's all we had for questions. I think this is cute comment here. I'd like to show you again. Thank you so much, Keisha. I've been following your content for months
Oh,
now on A Cloud Guru. You are supporting the cloud community tremendously.
oh, that's so nice. My pleasure. I really enjoy just introducing people to the cloud because it's just like it's totally amazing the things that you can do with cloud technology. So I enjoy it.
It is, and you're doing like amazing work, Keisha.
Thank you.
So, yep, that's all we had in store for you today, Keisha. I hope you really enjoyed the live stream because I did. Thank you so much for your time. And yep, that's all we had for today.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun being here and sharing with you all.
Thank you. We loved having you.